Welcome to Shadow Tales Archive. Tonight's story is titled, The Whispering Root. Let the shadows speak.
Part 1. The House That Waited. I never wanted the house. That's not some poetic exaggeration. I mean it in the most literal, gut-deep way. The first time I saw it, something inside me pulled back. It wasn't fear exactly. More like the bone-deep instinct to not step into dark water when you can't see the bottom. But Caleb loved it. It's got character, he said, his eyes lighting up in a way they hadn't in months. Look at the beams. The stone fireplace. That garden out back. It's like a storybook. I wanted to tell him that most fairy tales start in places like this. Remote cottages where strange things happen and no one hears the screaming. But instead I nodded, smiled, pretended I didn't feel the earth beneath that house breathing like something buried. We moved in on the 1st of October. The house sat at the edge of a dying village in the Pacific Northwest, tucked into a forested slope with roots that clawed their way up through the soil like fingers trying to escape. It wasn't just old, it was ancient in a way that defied its modest size. The walls bowed slightly as if it had inhaled long ago and never fully exhaled. Moss grew thick on the roof. Ivy clung to every corner as though trying to hold the place in place. Caleb called it charming. I called it a mistake. I should tell you about us. My name is Leah, 34. Failed painter, successful barista. My husband, Caleb, was the opposite. An up-and-coming software consultant whose job had bloomed through the pandemic while I wilted. We thought the move would fix things. Basie said. Silence. Somewhere to breathe. But it didn't take long for that silence to turn on us. We started unpacking in shifts. Caleb had work calls. I had time. Too much of it. By the second week, I knew where every squeaky board was. I'd memorized the way light filtered through the cracked kitchen window at 3:17 p.m. I started keeping track of little things, how many crows circled the backyard tree, how long it took the kettle to boil, how often the upstairs hallway light flickered even when it was off. I blamed the fuse box. Until the whisper started. It happened late when the wind was quiet and the air too still. I just finished brushing my teeth. Caleb was in his office downstairs, headphones on, probably ranting about code or crypto or whatever the hell kept him tethered to that screen. And then, Leah. Drawn out. Almost playful. Almost. I froze, toothbrush still in my mouth. My first thought was Caleb, but the voice hadn't come from below. It had come from the hall behind me. I turned, slowly, mouth still foaming. No one. Just that dim, flickering hallway and the feeling that something had just stepped into a shadow. I didn't sleep that night. Caleb didn't notice. I told myself it was my mind. You spend enough time alone, isolated, surrounded by damp wood and creaking walls, and your brain will start filling in the blanks. That's what I told myself the second time I heard it. That time I was in the garden. It was late morning. Fog hung low like a wet curtain. I was clipping dead herbs in the back when the air shifted. Leah. This time it came from beneath the ground. I don't mean through the soil like a vibration. I mean from the ground. The roots. The damn roots in that twisted yard that reached up around my ankles like they wanted me to stay. I dropped the shears. I went inside. I didn't tell Caleb. The thing about being isolated with someone you're slowly growing distant from is that every silence becomes an accusation. He didn't ask why I was jumpy. He didn't notice when I started keeping the hallway light on all night. When I started lighting candles in the kitchen, he just laughed and said I was finally embracing the witchy forest vibe. He was still smiling the night I woke to find him whispering in his sleep. He was facing away from me. The sheets were tangled around his legs and his voice was low, whispery, like someone responding to a call. Yeah, okay. I hear you. Then after a pause, Leah. I shook him awake hard. What? He muttered, eyes fluttering open. You were talking. In your sleep. Probably dreaming, he said groggy. Was it creepy? Did I say something hot? You said my name. Like someone told you to. That got his attention. He looked at me then, really looked. His brow furrowed. I don't remember. Sorry. I stared at him. Do you ever hear anything? In the house. He smirked. Like what? Creaks and moans. It's made of wood, babe. What do you expect? I mean, someone saying your name. His face darkened. For a second he looked like he wanted to say something. But then he shook his head. No, just you. The next day I met our neighbor. Her name was Mara. A woman in her late 70s with hair like silver thread and eyes the color of dried sage leaves. She lived alone in the house next door, the only other structure within walking distance. I saw your lights on late last night, she said, leaning on her cane. First few weeks are always hardest. I blinked. You've seen this before? Oh yes. People move in. Then they leave. Some faster than others. I tried to smile. You mean because it's isolated? No, she said plainly. Because the house doesn't like being ignored. Part 2. The voice beneath the floorboards. I wasn't sure how to respond to Mara. The way she said it, like the house was a thing that could feel, sulk, maybe even resent you, sent a chill across my neck. Ignore it too long, she added, squinting at the tree line beyond our property, and it starts calling again. Always does. You mean sounds? Like creaks and stuff? She looked at me for a long time before replying. No, Leah. I mean, it calls you. By name. I didn't answer. My throat had gone dry. Mara didn't push. She simply turned back to her porch and said over her shoulder, Don't listen too long. That's how it gets in. That night, Caleb stayed late at a client's house. Said their Wi-Fi was down and he had to be on site to troubleshoot. It wasn't the first time and I had stopped asking if he was really working. I made tea. Sat on the couch. Read a book I didn't absorb a single word of. Then, sometime after 11, I heard the voice again. Only this time, it didn't come from the hallway. Or the ground. It came from beneath the living room floor. Leah. Like breath pushed through rotting wood. Like something crawling between the joists, dragging its voice behind it like a tail. I stood up so fast the mug crashed to the floor and shattered. I didn't go back to the couch. I didn't go upstairs. I slept in my car. When Caleb returned at 2 a.m., he found the front door locked, the house dark, and me curled up in the driver's seat, engine idling. He tapped the window, confused, mouth already forming something patronizing. I rolled it down and whispered, It spoke again. He blinked. The house. No, I said, voice trembling. Something underneath it. To his credit, Caleb tried. The next morning he actually went under the house, crawled into the dirt crawlspace with a flashlight and a mask. I waited in the doorway like a coward, every muscle tight, ready to slam the door shut if he screamed. But he didn't. Nothing weird down there, he said when he emerged, brushing dust from his shirt. No signs of animals. No old pipes. No speakers. I told him it wasn't physical. He sighed, already halfway disengaged. Babe, I get it. You're under stress. Maybe talk to someone? Like a professional? There it was. The implication. I was spiraling again. Later that day, I knocked on Mara's door. She opened it slowly as if she'd been expecting me. I need to know what you meant, I said. About the house calling. About it getting in. She let me inside without a word. Her cottage was small but warm. Patchwork quilts, shelves of books, bundles of dried herbs hanging from the rafters. The air smelled like pine and lavender and something faintly metallic. Mara poured tea. Sat down opposite me in a rocking chair that creaked like old bones. You said it's called to others before, I began. She nodded. Who? My husband, for one. She said it flatly, without grief, as though it had been a fact of nature. He heard the name first, Mara continued. At night, then during the day, then everywhere. Always his name, whispered low, but not just in his ears. In him. What happened? He followed it. One night it called him into the woods, said it needed help, that it was trapped, that it wanted to be seen. I leaned forward, heart thudding. And he never came back. Not really. Her hand trembled slightly as she brought the tea to her lips. His body returned, she clarified, but not his voice, not his eyes. I woke up to him standing at the foot of our bed, staring like he didn't recognize what human meant anymore. The tea turned cold in my hands. "What is it?" I asked. "A ghost? Some demon? Why here?" Mara shook her head. "Not a ghost. Not quite. It's older, rooted. It doesn't haunt people. It grows in them. Like mold, like rot, like regret. It waits for the lonely, the unheard, the ones already slipping." I swallowed. "Why names?" "Because names are the first truth we're ever given," she said. "It calls yours to wear you down, makes it feel familiar. So when it finally says what it wants, you'll say yes." I wanted to laugh. I wanted to scream. I wanted to leave. Instead, I asked, "How do I stop it?" Mara looked out the window, her gaze distant. "You don't. You choose. You either ignore it or you let it in." I left Mara's cottage in a daze. Her words followed me home like echoes I couldn't shut out. It grows in the lonely. It waits for the unheard, the ones already slipping. I tried to distract myself, clean the kitchen, reorganize the junk drawer, watch TV at full volume. It didn't matter. At exactly 3:17 a.m., I woke up to silence. Not quiet silence, the kind that presses in from all sides. Even the crickets had gone still. And then, Leah. But this time it wasn't playful. It was hungry. I sat upright, heart in my throat. "Caleb?" I whispered, unsure why. No answer. I got up, moved toward the door. Something was wrong. The hallway was dark, but not just unlit. It was wrong. The air smelled of dirt and damp wood. The walls seemed closer. I turned on the light. It didn't help. The hallway stretched longer than it should have. Shadows pooled at the corners like spilled ink. The house was bending somehow. Or maybe I was. I heard footsteps upstairs, slow, deliberate, barefoot. Then, Leah. But this time it wasn't coming for me. It was calling through me. Part 3. Names in the Dirt. I didn't sleep after that. I sat in the hallway with the lights on and the door cracked open, staring down the corridor like a guard waiting for something he knows he can't stop. Caleb didn't stir once. Just lay there, breathing evenly like the world was whole. When the sun finally broke through the treeline, I felt no relief, just a grim kind of truce. Like something had retreated for now, but not because it was done. Because it was waiting. At breakfast, I watched Caleb butter his toast in silence. My hands were wrapped tight around a coffee mug that had long gone cold. He didn't look up. "You didn't sleep again?" "No." "You're not hearing it now, are you?" "No." He glanced at me then. "Eyes tired. Or maybe just empty." "I don't know what to do, Leah. I can't help you if you're not willing to help yourself." I said nothing. I didn't want to tell him the truth, that I'd started to wonder if maybe this was all in my head. Because if it wasn't, it was so much worse. Later that day, I went back to the garden. The tree in the center had always bothered me. It was too tall, too still. No birds ever perched there. No squirrels. Its bark was dark like dried blood. Its roots twisted outward like veins. I didn't know why I did it, but I grabbed the hand spade from the shed and started digging near the base. Not deep, just enough to disturb the topsoil. I hit something almost immediately. It was a bundle of fabric, soaked and half-rotted. I pulled it loose and unwrapped it slowly. Inside was a shard of bone, maybe animal, maybe not. And carved into the side, barely legible beneath dirt and time, was a name. Eva. I dropped it, backed away like it had burned me. I ran to Mara's cottage. Didn't knock. Just opened the door and called out her name. She came hobbling in from the back room, her eyes already knowing. "You found something," she said simply. I held out the bundle, hands shaking. "What the hell is this?" Mara took one look at the bone and sighed. "The roots keep secrets," she said, "but they don't bury them deep. Not if they want to be found." "That's a name, isn't it?" "Carved in." She nodded. "There are others, scattered through the village, buried under trees, floorboards, hearthstones. The land remembers." I sat down heavily. Who was Ava? One of the first settlers. Mid-1800s. Her name was called same as yours. She followed it into the forest. When she came back, she claimed it had spoken through her. Said she belonged to it now. She carved her name into bone, offered it to the soil. A binding. A promise. I stared at her. A ritual. Yes. To what? She hesitated. Then, it has no name. Only the ones it steals. I wanted to scream. Instead, I laughed, a dry, cracked sound that didn't feel like mine. "This is insane. You're telling me there's some ancient entity beneath this village that calls people? That makes them offer themselves to it?" Mara's eyes softened. "You already know the answer. You felt it." I looked down at my hands. Dirt still under my nails. A tremble I couldn't shake. "Is that what happened to your husband?" I asked. She nodded. "He resisted too long, then gave in all at once. There's no balance with it. You either ignore it completely, or you disappear." That night I locked all the doors, drew salt lines across the thresholds, lit candles and set them in every corner of the house. I didn't tell Caleb what I'd found. He wouldn't believe me. He'd just look at me with that mix of pity and fear. So I said nothing. Let him retreat into his emails and deadlines and late-night client visits. Let him pretend this place wasn't already inside us. The voice came again at 2:43 a.m., but it didn't say my name this time. It said his. Caleb. It echoed up from the vents, drifted down the stairs like smoke. I waited, holding my breath. I heard him stir, then silence, then the sound of his footsteps heading toward the hallway. I followed. He stood at the top of the stairs in nothing but his pajama bottoms, eyes half-lidded, face blank. "Caleb," I whispered. He didn't turn. The air was cold, wrong. The walls seemed to pulse. I stepped closer. "Caleb, come back to bed." He spoke softly. "It needs help." I froze. "What?" He turned to me, and for a moment, I swear to God, his eyes weren't his. They were dull, glassy, like something behind them had left and something else had crawled in. "It's trapped," he said. "It said I can set it free." I slapped him. "Art." His eyes blinked, cleared. "What the hell?" he asked, suddenly aware, rubbing his cheek. "You were sleepwalking," I said quickly. "You were saying things." He looked around, confused. "I don't remember." I grabbed his hand. "Come back to bed. Now." He followed. But as we lay down, I stared at the ceiling, too afraid to sleep. Because in that moment, just for a heartbeat, I'd believed him. And part of me still did. Part 4. The Hollowing. 3 days passed. Caleb didn't mention the night he stood at the stairs like a man dreaming someone else's dream. He acted like nothing had happened. Laughed at my cooking. Kissed me absent-mindedly. Told me he'd be out late again, another emergency consult. But something in him had shifted. He moved slower. Spoke less. Sometimes I caught him standing too still, head tilted as if listening to something I couldn't hear. He was fading. From the inside out. I returned to Mara's cottage. She was already waiting by the door, kettle hissing behind her. "Caleb's hearing it now," I said before she could speak. She nodded, grim. "It always spreads. Once it roots in one, the others follow." "What does it want from him?" "Same thing it wants from everyone. Entry. Devotion. It feeds on your need to be needed." I shivered. It told him it was trapped. Mara's hands trembled slightly as she poured the tea. That's how it begins. With pity. You think you're helping. You think it's wounded, desperate. But it's the other way around. It wounds you until you're desperate enough to listen. I stared into my cup, not drinking. What happens if he says yes? Then you'll lose him, she said. Piece by piece. First his sleep. Then his voice. Then his name. You mean like he forgets who he is? She shook her head. No. I mean the world forgets him. You'll look right at him and feel nothing. One day you'll realize you haven't said his name in weeks. Not even in your thoughts. Then one day he's gone. And no one remembers he was ever there. That night, I wrote Caleb's name on a piece of paper and hid it in my sock drawer. Just to be sure it wouldn't disappear. Just to prove to myself that he still existed. But I couldn't stop checking it. Every few hours, I'd sneak in and unfold the paper, half expecting it to be blank. So far it wasn't. But the letters looked fainter. 2 mornings later, I found him in the garden. Standing at the base of the tree. Staring into the soil. He didn't notice me at first. Just stood there, barefoot, shirtless, skin pale in the early light. I called his name. He turned, slowly. His eyes looked cloudy. Like smoke trapped in glass. I had a dream, he said. I kept my distance. What kind of dream? He smiled faintly. There was a room beneath the house. Stone walls. Old air. It was calling from down there. It said we used to worship it. That we used to remember. I felt cold seep into my lungs. What else? He blinked. It said you were next. I took a step back. You need to come inside, I said carefully. But Caleb didn't move. His hands twitched at his sides, fingers digging slightly into his palms. I think it's right, he whispered. I think we forgot something important. Something older than us. Maybe it's time to remember. I nearly screamed at him. Instead, I whispered, You're not hearing you, Caleb. You're hearing it. He looked up at me with something like pity. No, Leah. You're the one who can't hear. That night, I began looking through the village archives. The tiny local library was in a converted chapel. Dusty, quiet, long abandoned by anyone under 70. I found a box labeled Historical Folklore and Rural Practices, unpublished. Inside were yellowed sheets of hand-typed pages, ink drawings, diary fragments. I read until my vision blurred. There were accounts from settlers in 1843, references to the hollow root, a name spoken only at night. They wrote about sleep chants, rituals whispered into the soil to ensure crops would grow and children would survive the winter. But every ritual ended the same way, a name buried in bone, left at the base of a marked tree. There were maps, drawings of the village from over a century ago. I traced the landmarks trying to find our house. When I did, I felt my stomach turn. Our home stood directly over a spot marked with a black circle, scrawled in red ink. Beneath, Do Not Disturb. I returned home after dark. Caleb was in the kitchen, humming. It took me a second to realize what bothered me. The tune had no rhythm. Just a looping series of off notes that never resolved. Like something pretending to understand music. He turned when I came in. Smiled. Hey babe. I stared at him. Where were you? He asked. I didn't answer. Just watched how the corners of his smile twitched too hard. How he blinked too slowly. Your hands? I said quietly. He looked down. They were streaked with dirt. Oh, he said. I was digging. Just clearing some roots. I wanted to run. Instead I said, Come upstairs. You need rest. He didn't argue. That night I waited until he was asleep. Then I went outside with a flashlight and a shovel. The spot beneath the tree was still disturbed, freshly so. I dug with bare hands, not caring about the cold or the worms. I found another bundle. This time the bone was longer, sharper. Not animal. A name carved into it. But not mine. Not Ava's. Not Caleb's. It was Mara. I dropped the bone and stumbled back. The implications tumbled through me like ice. Had she buried it? Had he? Was she offering herself, or being marked? I needed answers. Now. Part 5. The Ones Who Remember. I returned to Mara's cottage before the sun came up. Didn't knock. Didn't wait. I burst through her door with dirt still caked under my fingernails and the bone in my hand, wrapped in the same rotting cloth that had held so many others. She was in her armchair as if she hadn't moved all night. I found your name, I said. She didn't look surprised, only sad. So, she murmured, it's begun again. You didn't warn me, I snapped. You knew I was getting pulled in, you knew it had reached Caleb, but you never told me it had touched you too. Mara's eyes were heavy. Would it have mattered if I had? I might have run. I might have saved him. No, she said simply. You would have stayed. We always do. I stood in the middle of her living room, trembling, still holding the damn bone like it was some kind of evidence in a crime I couldn't define. Tell me the truth, I whispered. All of it. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she stood, slowly like her bones were remembering how, and motioned for me to follow. We went out the back door and down a narrow path lined with stones and dry brush. The trail twisted behind her house like a scar across the land. Eventually we reached a clearing. At its center stood another tree. But this one was dead, completely. Black bark. No leaves. Hollowed through the middle like it had been burned from the inside. Mara touched its trunk with reverence. This is where I buried my name, she said. 62 years ago. I was 17, she continued. Lonely. Quiet. Left behind by every friend I had when they left for the cities. I heard the voice one night. Thought it was my dead sister at first. She died in this village. Pneumonia. I remained silent, listening. I followed the voice. It told me I didn't have to be alone, that I could be part of something eternal, that if I gave it my name, it would never forget me. She smiled bitter. It was the first thing that ever asked for me. I finally spoke. But you resisted. She shook her head. No. I said yes. She stepped back from the tree. Her shadow stretched unnaturally far. For years after, I wasn't myself, she said. I'd disappear for days. Wake up with blood on my hands. People left town. Some vanished. I gripped the bone tighter. What stopped it? Time. The house got sold. New families moved in. They were harder to touch. Less vulnerable. And I got old. That matters somehow. It prefers the young. The hurting. She turned to me. You're both. I looked back toward our house, just barely visible beyond the tree line. A shiver ran through me. I need to stop it, I said. You can't stop what was never alive. Then tell me how to kill it. Mara gave me a long, searching look. You can't kill it, but you can deny it. Cut it off from memory. Burn its roots. Bury its names. Starve it. I hesitated. That's what you did? No, she said. I just went quiet and hoped it would forget me. I left the clearing without another word. By the time I got home, it was just afternoon. Caleb wasn't in the kitchen. Not in the bedroom. Not in the office. I called his name once. Silence. Then something moved under the floorboards. A dragging sound. I dropped to my knees beside the living room vent and peered into the grate. At first, just dust. Then, fingertips. Thin. Pale. Scraping lightly along the wood. I screamed and stumbled back. The fingers retracted. I tore through the hallway yelling his name, slamming open every closet, every cabinet. Then I heard the front door creak. I spun around. Caleb stood there. But it wasn't him. Not really. His face was the same, but too smooth. His eyes too dark. His breath didn't fog in the cold. And he was smiling. Where were you? I choked out. He tilted his head. Beneath, he said. I saw it. I remember now. I backed away. It has your name too, Leah. It's been saying it longer than you've been alive. You've always belonged. I turned to run. But the air in the room thickened, like syrup, like fog made of whispers. The light dimmed. The shadows writhed. And then in every room, from every crack and vent and wall seam, it spoke. Leah. Not one voice. Hundreds. All at once. Young. Men. Women. Children. All saying my name like a lullaby dragged across a broken record. Leah. 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 I collapsed, hands to my ears. And in that moment I saw it. Not with my eyes, but somewhere deeper. The thing that called was not a shape. It was a memory that had grown teeth. A knot of voices knotted together like roots, spiraling down through the soil into an endless black mouth. It had names coiled around its limbs, bones used as antennae, eyes grown from forgotten prayers. It had no face, only a hunger to be spoken of. And in that moment, I understood. If I gave it mine, it would stop whispering. But it wouldn't leave. It never leaves. It just waits for the next name. Part 6. To be forgotten. I left the house at dawn. Didn't take anything but the name. Caleb, or what was wearing Caleb, was still inside, pacing the halls. Sometimes laughing. Sometimes whispering. Sometimes repeating my name in a voice that sounded too much like mine. I walked the mile-long dirt path to the village records office, heart racing with every step. The air felt heavier now, like the trees themselves were listening. I knew what I had to do. I had to erase myself. The records clerk was an old man who looked like he belonged in a mausoleum. His eyes were clouded with cataracts, but he moved like someone who'd memorized the shape of every drawer decades ago. I need to see the old registries, I told him. He squinted. Marriages? Births? Deaths? Names? I said. Just names? He didn't ask questions, just nodded and shuffled off into the back. Minutes later, he returned with a leather-bound book thick as a tombstone and older than the building itself. I opened it. There, among the faded ink and crumbling pages, was my name, Leah Morgan. I stared at it like it was a wound. Erasing a name is harder than you'd think. You can't just burn it. Not when it's already whispered. Not when it's already remembered. But there were entries here I didn't recognize, names scratched out completely, not with ink but with ritual. I could tell. The paper around them was burned, blistered, warped by some unnatural heat. And yet the rest of the book was untouched, protected, intentionally. I turned to the clerk. Who did this? He blinked. Old rites. Village used to have a kind of priestess, I guess. Kept names clean. Buried the ones that called too loud. Mara. I left the registry with one page folded under my coat. My name. And a plan. I returned to Mara's one last time. She opened the door before I even knocked. You're going to try, aren't you? She said. I nodded. There's a way, she said. But it hurts. I don't care. You might not survive it. Then I won't be anything worth saving. She led me into the back room. A space I'd never seen before. Dark. Circular. Stone walls. Symbols scrawled in soot and ash. Bones, small ones, woven into patterns along the floor. The house won't let go of you until you're forgotten, she said. By others. And by yourself. That's not possible. Not fully. But you can starve it. Make yourself harder to grasp. Deny it the sound of your name. She handed me a vial filled with something black and thick. Drink this. It's part of the rite. Nightshade. Monkshood. A few other things. I hesitated. Then drank. I collapsed within minutes. Not into unconsciousness. Into memory. I was 6 again. In my childhood bedroom. The wallpaper peeling. My mother screaming downstairs. My father long gone. And there it was. A whisper from the closet. Leah. Even then I'd heard it. Even then it had started. I was 13. Sitting alone at lunch, watching the other girls laugh through braces and friendship bracelets. Something under the table touched my leg. A whisper against my thigh. Leah. 25. The day Caleb proposed. A whisper in the breeze that made me look over my shoulder. Always there. Always calling. I hadn't fallen into the house. I'd been delivered. I came back with a scream lodged in my throat. Mara caught me before I hit the floor. "You saw it, didn't you?" she whispered. I nodded, gagging, sweating. "It's older than you," she said. "It marked you long before the house. But now you can mark it back." I held up the torn registry page. My name smudged, half-burned, fingers shaking. She handed me a knife, bone-handled. "Carve it," she said. "Then bury it beneath the dead tree. That's the final severance." I stumbled through the woods with the page clenched in one fist and the knife in the other. When I reached the clearing, the hollow tree loomed over me like a mouth wide open. I dropped to my knees and carved each letter into the bark. L-H. My hand shook. The blade slipped. Blood joined the carving. Then I took the page and shoved it into the slit I had made, buried it deep, pressed the bark closed like a wound. The tree groaned. Oh, it. And then, silence. Not peace, but absence. I walked back to the house under a sky gone completely black. No stars. No moon. Inside, Caleb was waiting. But something had changed. He blinked when he saw me. Like he didn't recognize me. Like he couldn't say my name. "What are you doing here?" he asked, voice slow. "I live here," I replied evenly. I don't think so." And for the first time in weeks he looked scared. I stepped past him, went to the bedroom, closed the door, and waited. Outside the house creaked, but it didn't speak. Not once. Part 7. The Price of Remembering. For 3 days the house was silent. No whispers, no scratching, no dragging footsteps beneath the floor. Just cold stillness. Caleb didn't say much. He moved through the halls like a guest who'd forgotten why he came. He looked at me with confusion as if I were a shape he almost recognized. But never once did he say my name. That, I realized, was the proof. I was finally starving it. I thought it was over. But the thing about forgetting something ancient is that it doesn't forget you. On the 4th night, I woke to the sound of water dripping. Then the floorboards began to swell, soft and bloated beneath my feet. I followed the sound down the hallway. Every step felt heavier, soggier, like I was walking on rot. The living room walls were pulsing. Not metaphorically, literally breathing in and out, the wood expanding and contracting with a sound like wheezing lungs. Caleb stood in the center of it all, back to me. "Caleb," I said softly. He turned slowly. His face was blank, his eyes weeping soil. "I remember you," he said, voice not his own. Something rippled behind him. A bulge in the wall. Then another. Then a hand. Bone white and jointless, like a root that had grown fingers. It pushed through the wood with no resistance. And then a face. Not a human face. Not even close. A suggestion of one, formed from twisted bark, eyeless sockets, a jagged opening where a mouth should be. No teeth, just names. Names spilling out in whispers and echoes. Leah, Caleb, Eva, Mara, Daniel, Ruth, Leah, Caleb, Leah. Each repetition louder. Each syllable trying to reclaim what had been denied. I backed away, but the door behind me was gone. No longer would just bark. Nodded. Alive. "You tried to forget," it rasped. "But you remembered." I shook my head. "I erased everything." "Not everything," it said. "You remembered him." I looked at Caleb. He was shivering, lips moving silently, hands twitching like leaves in wind. "Let him go," I said. It tilted its root-shaped head. "Give me the name again," it said. "And I will." I realized with a sinking heart that I had two choices. Speak my name aloud, invite it back in, offer myself again and spare Caleb. Stay silent. Let it consume him and maybe leave me untouched. It wanted acknowledgement, nothing more. like a shadow starving for the shape that cast it. But I knew what would happen if I gave it that. I'd forget who I was, and worse, so would everyone else. I would become a whisper, a root, a name carved into bone and buried beneath a tree that no one dared look at for too long. "Choose," it said. Caleb's mouth opened. He whispered my name, and the house shuddered. I screamed, and oh, then I ran, straight into the creature, straight into its maw of memory and soil and broken syllables. I didn't know what I was doing, only that I had to end it, cut the root before it reached further. I slammed the bone-carved knife Mara had given me into the bark where the creature's throat should be. Not flesh, but memory. It howled, not with sound, with names, thousands of them, bursting from the walls, from the floors, from the vents, and then silence, real silence, the kind that doesn't wait for more, the kind that marks the end. When I came to, I was outside, flat on my back in the garden, the dead tree looming above me. The house was gone. I don't mean collapsed, I mean gone. No walls, no roof, no sign of the life or unlife that had pulsed within it. Just moss and dirt and a foundation of stone with names etched into it like tomb markers. Caleb sat beside me, blinking in the sunlight. "Do I know you?" he asked. I looked at him, really looked. The thing inside him was gone, but so was the part of him that remembered me. He was free, but at the cost of us. I smiled softly. "It doesn't matter," I said, and I stood up, walked down the path, away from the clearing, away from the roots, away from the names. I never looked back, because I knew it was waiting for the next whisper, and I would not be the one to answer. Part 8. The name that was never spoken. I walked for 2 days. No phone, no backpack, no idea where the hell I was going. Just miles of forest and a silence so wide it felt like I was walking through the pause between heartbeats. No one passed me. No one stopped me. No one saw me. By the second morning, I understood why. I was forgetting. Not in the way people forget birthdays or directions. This was something deeper. A slow unraveling of presence. Like the air no longer bent around me. Like the world wasn't quite sure I was still here. I found a bus stop on the edge of a ghost town. Bought a one-way ticket west. Paid in cash. When the driver asked my name for the manifest, I just stared at him. I don't think I have one, I said. He gave me a look but didn't push it. Just scribbled something down and waved me aboard. I sat in the back. Watched the trees blur past. Somewhere behind me the house was still gone. But the soil remembered. I ended up in a small coastal town. The kind of place people go to vanish without raising suspicion. Rented a room above a bait shop. Paid weekly. The landlord called me Red because of my hair. I didn't correct him. I never corrected anyone. I got a job shelving books at a used bookstore. The owner was blind in one eye and didn't care who I was. Perfect. The books, though, they knew. Every so often, I'd find one flipped open to a page with my name printed in old ink. Fiction. Non-fiction. Didn't matter. It found me in margins and titles. In characters long forgotten. Leah. But the longer I stayed silent, the fewer times it appeared. Starved of acknowledgement, it began to thin. Eventually the books forgot too. But not always. Some nights, when the wind cuts a certain way, I swear I hear it again. Not loud. Not desperate. Just curious. Leah? Like it's testing. Wondering if I'm ready to be known again. I never answer. Then one day the girl came in. Couldn't have been older than 17. Pale. Quiet. Thin as a willow branch. She didn't ask for help. Just wandered the aisles until she found the folklore section. I watched from behind the counter, and then I saw her reach for it. A book with no title on the spine. She opened it, paused, read something. I knew before she looked up what she had seen. Her name. She brought it to the counter, placed it down gently, like she knew it mattered. Her eyes found mine, Do you think names can chase you? I didn't answer at first. I looked at the page she'd opened. The ink was old, but the name wasn't. It was hers, carved there like a warning, or an invitation. Finally I said, yes, but only if you say them out loud. She nodded slowly, closed the book, didn't buy it, didn't take anything at all, just left. But before she stepped outside, she turned back and asked, "What's your name?" I smiled, felt the wind curl around me, felt the world hesitate, and I said, "I don't remember." She smiled back, walked out, and the wind didn't whisper that night, not once.
And that was tonight's tale from the Shadowed Tales archive. If it left a mark on your mind, if the silence feels heavier now, then the story did what it was meant to do. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the darkness. New stories are always on their way. Until then, keep the lights low and the doors locked.